Stamford Bridge, the heart and soul of Chelsea Football Club. For more than 100 years, it's been more than just a stadium. It's been a home where history is made week in and week out. But now, the future of this iconic ground is, well, let's just say it's a little complicated. Of course, as beloved as it is, it's starting to show its age. With a capacity of 40,000, it's just not keeping up with the demands of today's football fans. And let's be real, the facilities deserve to match the legacy of the club itself. That's why Chelsea is facing a tough decision. Do they rebuild Stamford Bridge completely, keeping the current location but giving it a $1.9 billion makeover? Or do they start fresh in a brand new location, leaving behind over 100 years of history? Let's take a look. Did you know Stamford Bridge is the oldest ground in the Premier League? That's right. It's also the fifth oldest football stadium in the world, behind historic venues like Wrexham's Racecourse Ground and Sheffield's Bramall Lane. It first opened its gates in 1877, but here's the twist. It wasn't even built for football. Cricket, rugby and even baseball came first. Back then it hosted track and field events for the London Athletic Club. Football? Not until much later. Fast forward to 1904. The stadium caught the eye of two brothers, Gus and Joseph Mears. They had big plans. Football was on the rise and they wanted Stamford Bridge to be the centrepiece. Though Fulham FC was their first pick to play there, but when Fulham declined, the brothers took matters into their own hands. That's when Chelsea FC was born, in 1905. Their first match was played later that year. Back then, the stadium had open terraces, a running track circling the pitch, and a single covered stand for about 5,000 fans. Not exactly what we see today, but it was still impressive for the time. Over the years, Stamford Bridge got some major upgrades. In the 1920s, it hosted FA Cup finals. By the 1930s, the stadium had started expanding with new stands on either end. By the 1960s and 70s, new west and east stands were added, though there were a few bumps along the way. Let's just say construction wasn't exactly smooth sailing. And then came the 1990s, a real make or break era. Chelsea was facing the possibility of losing the stadium altogether, but fans rallied and the club managed to save it. By 2001, Stamford Bridge became an all-seater stadium, and that's what we see today. So what sets Stamford Bridge apart from other stadiums? The original stands were designed by Archibald Leach, the go-to guy for stadium architecture back in the day. Over time, wooden stands gave way to reinforced concrete and capacity grew and shrank depending on the era. These days, Stamford Bridge seats around 40,000 fans. It's not the biggest stadium out there, but it's got a charm that's hard to beat. But this iconic place has been having some problems recently. The biggest problem of them all, capacity. Stamford Bridge seats just over 40,000 people. Now compare that to Arsenal's Emirates Stadium with 60,000 or Tottenham's 62,850. Yeah, Chelsea is playing catch up here. Why does this matter? Match day revenue. Chelsea pulls in about $102.5 million a year. Sounds like a lot, but Tottenham and Liverpool rake in $156.25 million and $140 million. That's a huge gap. Every empty seat is money lost, and in football, money means staying competitive. Okay, so why not just expand Stamford Bridge? Well, it's not that simple. Redeveloping the stadium would cost around $750 million. That's a massive investment with a long payback period. But the most tricky part of all of this was buying the land. Stamford Bridge is surrounded by railway lines and residential buildings. Expanding would mean acquiring land, tearing down structures, and dealing with some pretty serious planning headaches. And it's not just about money. The Chelsea pitch owners who hold the freehold to the land haven't agreed to sell either, and without that, making major changes is almost impossible. Even if Chelsea could expand, there's another big issue: infrastructure. Stamford Bridge isn't a location that can handle bigger crowds. The roads around the stadium are pretty limited. And if there's one thing about the area, it's that the public transport is going to be overloaded. There are only 3 main exit routes, and they all lead to Fulham Road. Doubling the capacity would create a logistical nightmare for fans and the local community. So the solution has been speculated to build a new stadium, which is why Chelsea is eyeing locations like Earl's Court, which could accommodate 60,000 fans. This isn't just about packing in more people, it's about staying competitive. A bigger stadium means more revenue, a better matchday experience, and attracting younger fans who expect top-tier facilities. But then again, nothing is final yet. First option, like we just said, is a complete rebuild. That would mean tearing down Stamford Bridge and starting fresh. But the problem is it's going to cost around $2 billion to create a 60,000-seat stadium. And then there's the fact that it would take about 7 years to complete, and construction wouldn't even begin until 2026. That's a long wait. So where would Chelsea play in the meantime? That's a question that's still up in the air. Moving out for several seasons might not sit well with fans. Next, we've got the stand-by-stand approach. Instead of demolishing the whole stadium, Chelsea could renovate it one section at a time. This way, the team could stay at Stamford Bridge throughout the process. It sounds convenient, but let's be real, it's not all smooth sailing. This method comes with big logistical headaches. Plus, it could drag out the process even longer than a full rebuild. Lastly, there's the wildcard option of moving to a brand new location. Like we said before, one of the top contenders is Earl's Court. But the problem with this is that Earl's Court already has its own development plans, and they don't include a football stadium. Plus, moving away from Stamford Bridge means navigating approvals, planning challenges, and convincing the Chelsea pitch owners. And trust us, that's no small task. They hold the rights to Stamford Bridge, and any big changes need 75% approval from their shareholders. Reports describe the relationship between Todd Boehly and Behdad Eghbali as irreconcilable. Eghbali supports a £1.5 billion renovation plan to increase Stamford Bridge's capacity to 55,000, while Boehly favoured relocating to Earl's Court, a now unviable option. Speculation suggests that Boehly could even exit the club, leaving the future of Stamford Bridge in the hands of Eghbali and Clearlake Capita. And don't forget, whatever decision they make, renovation, rebuild or relocation, comes with a hefty price tag, which are massive investments even for a club like Chelsea. Back in 2015, the design for Chelsea FC's revamped Stamford Bridge was proposed by Herzog de Meuron, a world-renowned Swiss architecture firm, in collaboration with Lifschutz Davidson Sandilands, a London-based architectural practice. This proposal was commissioned by Chelsea FC under the ownership of Roman Abramovich, who wanted to modernise Stamford Bridge. So what was this design? Well, it would have bumped Stamford Bridge's capacity up to 60,000 seats, a big leap from the current 41,837. More fans, more energy, and a whole new matchday vibe. Sounds exciting, right? Not to mention there would have been 264 slender brick piers inspired by Gothic architecture and the Victorian brick terraces nearby, which wouldn't just give the stadium a unique identity, but also keep it rooted in its West London surroundings. The roof had a circular peak above the pitch, creating a rectangular opening that let natural light pour into the stadium. And the overall look would have been modern and bold, but with a touch of tradition. There were also some plans for some amazing extras like a club shop, a museum, restaurants and cafes. And as for the money, it would have cost about $625 million. That's a huge investment. But with the added capacity and modern facilities, it was meant to pay off in the long run. What makes this design special is how it balances the old and the new. Stamford Bridge has been Chelsea's home since 1905, and this plan kept that legacy alive. Herzog de Meuron wanted fans to feel like they belonged, blending history with innovation. So why didn't this happen? Unfortunately, delays, economic challenges, and expired planning permissions put the brakes on this ambitious project. But Chelsea FC hasn't given up on their dream of a modern stadium. The club is still exploring options, and who knows, this design could inspire future plans. So, renovating Stamford Bridge or building a new stadium? Both options are tipping over the $1.875 billion, and it's not just the construction we're talking about. There's land acquisition too. Chelsea recently bought a 1.2-acre site next to Stamford Bridge for about $100 million. It's all part of their strategy to make redevelopment possible. As for the investment, Chelsea's already lined up some big investors. The US firm Ares Management is stepping in with a $500 million injection. And remember when Todd Boehly and Clearlake Capital bought Chelsea in 2022? They promised an extra $2.1875 billion to upgrade the club. That includes this stadium project. Now, here's where things get tricky. If Chelsea goes ahead with construction, they'll need to move out of Stamford Bridge. And not just for a few games, we're talking at least 5 to 6 years. Think about the challenges. How do you keep fans engaged when your home base is gone? Stamford Bridge isn't just a stadium. It's been Chelsea's home since 1905. Moving could make fans feel disconnected, and keeping match attendance up won't be easy. To stay competitive, Chelsea needs to up their game too. Better facilities mean more revenue, which means they can attract and keep top-tier players. So, what's it going to be? Renovate Stamford Bridge and keep the history alive? Or start fresh with a new stadium that sets Chelsea up for the future? Either way, it's not going to be easy or cheap. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Would you stick with the bridge, or are you ready for something new? Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more Megabuild stories. See you next time.